Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session on project facilitation in fragile countries, navigating political risk, enabling renewable energy investments. My name is Nolazi Kumalo. I'll be the MC for this session. This session is organized in partnership with the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. The session will discuss the challenges and opportunities that lie in fragile and conflict-affected countries and how to overcome political risks to attract renewable energy investments in those contexts. In this session, we will have a scene-setting presentation, which will be followed by a panel discussion. For the scene-setting presentation, let's welcome Munuera, Senior Advisor, Urban Energy in UNEP. Louis is leading UNEP's global work on urban energy, which includes UNEP's program on local and integrated energy systems in Ukraine in cooperation with IRENA. He worked with the International Energy Agency, leading its work on smart grids and energy systems integration, and also has extensive clean energy implementation experience abroad. For this session, we also have the Slido code. Please make sure that you select the green track, and audience can use the Slido code to post their questions to the panelists. Louis, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and it's my pleasure to deliver the scene-setting remarks. Let's maybe start with a Slido. I understand that maybe we'll have... Exactly. So the question they were asking you this morning is, how would you best describe the current investment climate in fragile and conflict-affected countries? So you can start giving us some answers, and I believe we're going to get a word cloud that's going to be appearing on screen. But perhaps we can give it a second and then come back towards the end of the presentation to see what your answers have been. Oh, challenging. I already saw challenging appearing. Yes, indeed. It is challenging. So let me perhaps begin these opening remarks by saying that when we talk about investing in fragile and conflict-affected countries, the conversation often starts with the challenges. But what I want to say that today, in today's global context, where the value of international cooperation, we have to demonstrate it, we cannot just assume it. Let me just start by focusing on the opportunity that the panel is going to be exploring. Why clean energy investment in these countries matters, and why it deserves the attention of the international community. Today, roughly 80% of the world's people without electricity, without reliable access to electricity, live in these countries. These environments, they tend to be unreliable or present power or absent power, and this exacerbates humanitarian crises, disrupts basic services like, for example, healthcare, education, water supply. But it also means that there is an enormous opportunity for investing in new renewable markets on the way to tripling the global renewable capacity by 2030, for which we know today that there's about $500 million a gap in investment. In general, renewable energy offers a more resilient, more flexible pathway to electrify fragile states. Solar and wind resources are very abundant in many of these countries, and they're modular, and that means that these systems can be deployed at any scale, from a single home system to a village microgrid to eventually a utility scale plant. And this can be expanded incrementally as conditions improve, as fragility decreases. So evidence from programs that we're carrying out around the world shows that investing in renewable energy in these countries is not just about climate goals. It is a strategy for resilience and for peace building. Clean energy access can bolster, can improve socioeconomic development and state legitimacy, and it can escape some of these countries to escape this trap of fragility. Renewables can deliver what we're calling in the sector peace dividends by improving daily life and reducing conflict pressures. For example, solar electrification of schools and clinics in Ukraine is now allowing them to function despite the grid collapses, which maintains essential services and community trust even amid these conflicts. Renewable energy also supports livelihoods. For example, powering small businesses, agriculture, what in the community we call productive uses. You've heard it said many times in the last couple of days. And it reduces competition over scarce resources. So in Sudan, for example, where UNEP is working, installing solar-powered water pumps has eased chronic water shortages that previously were fueling internal conflicts. And today, over 200,000 people in 8 localities now have steady water supply, which reduces disputes. And the point I want to make here is that this is not just limited to small or community-scale renewable energy. Large-scale renewable projects in these countries are also becoming a reality the world over. They do need strong backing from international financial institutions, and they do need careful design to withstand instability. But in our view, they hold transformative potential for economic recovery and for providing energy access at scale. In Afghanistan, for example, a 10-megawatt solar plant in Kandahar that was developed through a public-private partnership is now supplying affordable power to local industries, and it showed how blended finance can enable utility-scale projects even in such insecure environments. Similarly, for example, Mali is building a 50-megawatt solar farm with World Bank financing, aiming to strengthen its grid, to reduce fuel imports, and to support post-conflict recovery. In Ukraine, IRENA, together with ourselves, with UNEP, we're developing the bankable feasibility assessments of 30 megawatts worth of solar plants. Other fragile states are also moving forward. So, for example, in Somalia, there is a plan for small-scale solar and wind IPPs. Iraq has tendered large solar projects to address power shortages, and the DRC is pursuing both mega hydro and smaller micro hydro schemes in difficult areas. And we are also seeing evidence that decentralized renewables can be scaled, even in these fragile states. So in the DRC, for example, a project started with 1.3 megawatts mini-grid with the backing of Microsoft and through an innovative financing scheme, and it enabled renewable power, public lighting, and community safety. A second deal is now supporting 3.7 megawatts of solar microgrid to reach 125,000 people. In short, renewable energy intervention in these countries can simultaneously address humanitarian needs, it can support development, it can foster stability, but they need to be implemented with care, which is what brings us to today's panel, where we aim to understand better the unique challenges that are affecting investment in these countries. So let me move on to some of these challenges, and I will just mention them very, very briefly because we will go in depth in the panel. Fragile states are often suffering from weak institutions, from unclear regulation, from poor enforcement. For example, disputed land rights, or corruption, or political instability. They can derail energy projects and increase investor risk. Conflict can often disrupt planning and maintenance, and it can create this vicious cycle. Weak governance, it hinders energy development, and energy poverty, it deepens fragility. The second challenge is that investors often see fragile and conflict-affected settings as high risk due to the instability, due to poor revenue reliability, to currency issues, and to few options for exit. As a result, these kind of countries receive minimal energy finance. So today, only 1.1% of global energy access funding goes to countries with the largest access deficits. Security risks also directly threaten infrastructure and personnel. So, for example, unlike mobile diesel units, renewable systems are fixed, and they're vulnerable to looting or to attack. Transporting equipment can often mean doing it through difficult regions or negotiating with armed actors. And maintenance in volatile areas can be dangerous, can be costly. And the last challenge I will highlight now is that renewable projects in these countries can be politically sensitive. Perceived bias, for example, favoring one group or displacing communities on contested land, can trigger tensions. This means that we need to share the benefits in an inclusive way across gender, across age, and marginalized groups. This is essential. We're going to be hearing in detail about how to mitigate these and other risks on the panel. And the last point I want to make with these opening remarks is that what we have learned when approaching investments in these countries is how important it is that international organizations, that finance institutions, that developers adopt what we're calling as conflict-sensitive approaches when implementing clean energy programs in these countries. This means systematically analyzing the context and integrating peace-building considerations into how we design the projects so that the intervention can support the stability and do not do more harm. The work here begins with thorough context analysis and truly meaningful community engagement. Actively involving local communities, for example, at every step of the way from the beginning. This builds trust, this builds ownership, and it reduces opposition to these projects. So in Sudan, for example, UNEP's water projects formed village committees to manage the solar pumps. And this ensured technical sustainability on the one hand, but it also fostered cooperation over previously contested resources. And the idea here is that when communities are true stakeholders, renewable initiatives can also be platforms where we can hold dialogue and we can increase peace building. This kind of conflict-sensitive project design, the idea behind it is also to distribute, as I was saying, project benefits equitably and to be able to reach the most vulnerable actors and the most vulnerable groups. For example, this can involve setting connection targets for poorer households or subsidizing costs for marginalized communities. Gender inclusion is also very important. For example, training women as solar technicians and including women in energy communities, given that they do have a unique perspective on community needs. Here, renewable energy can be a shared community asset and not a source of new inequality. And then I'll finish with what is perhaps most commonly mentioned as the largest stumbling block. De-risking and innovative finance, which is key to unlock more renewable investment in fragile countries. Using this kind of conflict-sensitive approaches, we can craft finance mechanisms that blend development aid, public funds, and private capital to share the risks. We're going to hear about these examples in the panel. And finally, what I will say, because it will also be featured in this panel, is that successful conflict-sensitive renewable energy projects need strong monitoring systems and flexibility to adapt. So they're quite different in the sense that they need to track not only technical and financial performance, but also social and conflict-related impacts. And here, environmental and social safeguards can help prevent unintended harm. The core principle here is adaptability. In fragile settings, maintaining trust and responding to new risks, to emerging risks, to changing situations is essential for projects to be a success. So with that, I'll finish my opening remarks and pass on to Ahmed Badr. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. We now move along to our panel discussion. In the panel discussion, the panelists will share lessons learned, de-risking mechanism and financing tools in place, as well as partnership models that enable project development in high-risk context. The panel discussion will be moderated by Ahmed Badr. Can we welcome Ahmed Badr to the floor? Ahmed is a director of Project Facilitation and Support Division in IRENA. The division offers members a dedicated project implementation support. He brings more than 30 years of international experience in the field of banking and finance. You have the floor.
Sorry, Luis, I'm a little bit short, so I had to make it down. So good morning, distinguished guests and all fellow colleagues here. It's my first time to be in the IRENA Sustainability Week. Very happy to be here. I joined IRENA about 5 years ago, and it's my real pleasure to facilitate this session. It's really coming in the right moment. I would like to build on the good background and illustrated explanation by my colleague Luis, that actually the fragile conflict and violence or fragile and conflict situations happening globally, it's not only about the only few countries that highlighted in the presentation of Luis, but actually it's more than this. Specifically, if you go for my beloved continent, Africa, I'm African, I'm Egyptian, so it's really right moment to see how can we navigate the energy transition, because in itself, energy transition is another big challenge in itself, and also affected by the conflict in climate change. So, as we are talking energy transition, the issue of geopolitical situation, specifically in relation to climate change, is always an ever-growing challenge and growing conflict situation not only between developing and developed countries, but also from the perspective of technology, of investment, how can we make project bankable? It's in itself really a big challenge, specifically in developing economies, because they face a lot of energy transformation structure that they have to deal with. So it's really a very complicated challenge situation. I have to say, it's one of the main legacies for the current Director General who established this new service package about project facilitation and support as service, not as a division. And doing so, we had to deal with such a kind of FCV situation or FCS. By the way, both of them are aiming to the same. So FCV is the World Bank terminology, referring to fragile conflict and violence. Actually, FCS, as presented in Lewis, just to unify the terminology, meaning fragile and conflict situations. Both are the same, and actually referring to what and how we deal with such a kind of challenges within the scope and the lens of the energy transition. So, to set the scene in terms of discussion and to welcome my fellow panelists, in a few minutes, I have to say that there are 3 cases that I would like to refer to without giving details, because I believe that in the discussion we go through details, it's about the cases we have or we had to deal with. We believe until now we were successful in what we do, some of which we achieved good results, some of which is underway. And I would like to start with the case of Jordan. Jordan is a country that's basically having a very tough situation in terms of water stress. They are one of the most country are very arid, having very arid environment. So the water stress adding to them an additional challenge for energy transition. And over the past year, we had to work with my colleagues in IRENA in general in order to help the country to achieve the financial close of one of the national projects. It's called AAWCB, or Aqaba Amman Water Desalination and Conveyance Project. And we believe we've done that in a very proper way with our partner from member countries. I refer to European Commission and Government of Jordan. For Ukraine, it's really one of the big topics that we need to discuss today. I'm happy that one of our panelists coming from Ukrainian side, but it's very important to highlight also that the Ukraine is very strong country and they are trying to face the situation in a very pragmatic way. I myself, I had the opportunity to visit them in the past year during the war time, and I believe that, I see that they are doing their all best in order to see how to accommodate and to find more safe conditions to the Ukrainian people. The final country that I would like to just to highlight and we discuss at length actually is the case that we have in Africa, and that's basically in Sudan. In Sudan, actually, it's another important country that's really still passing through a very tough time, and we're trying to make some kind of small intervention, but at the same time to see how can we help small interventions to provide some kind of clean and access to energy in the same time with a small community, but at least trying to do something while the overall situation is still not helping. Without further ado, I would like to introduce a panel and to see how can we present this very hot topic. And as usual, we start with our ladies. So I would like to invite Miss Linda Wamune to join us. She is a program director at Energy Peace Partners. Please, Linda, join us. Also, I would like to invite Mr. Kristen Petillon, who is basically the business engagement lead for PeaceNexus, please. Ms. Nadiia Petruchenko, the head of business development at SPP. She's economic entrepreneur, please. And also Ms. Jisung, the senior underwriter from MIGA. And Mr. Reda, who's from Africa 50. Africa 50 is our ETA partners and the global unique financial platform in Africa based in Morocco. And finally, Ms. Anja Wensing, basically she's from GIZ and the clean cooking component lead at GIZ. let's start with Linda. Following starting with women is really very interesting for very important reason. Women are always more smart than men. I have to admit that. Sorry for my fellow colleagues from men, but it's the fact. We have to admit the fact, not to debate it. So, Linda, we know very well that the issue of really the FCV is a very big barrier to achieve basically any kind of energy transition globally. From your perspective, what energy peace partners have done in the work, and how do you work on the gap for substantial conflict in order to see with your modality to achieve such a kind of challenges and to overcome with it? Floor is yours. Linda, please.
Thank you, Ahmed. So just to give a small background of the work that we do, working in this fragile and conflict-affected countries, we have an innovative financing instrument that we call the Peace Renewable Energy Credit, which we issue to electrification projects to address financing challenges. And we, in terms of getting the information, trying to get that information of which countries and where specifically should we focus in every country, we first start off by mapping out within the country which regions are most conflict affected and what are their needs. And at the core of this, because we do not have a physical presence in each of these countries, we rely a lot on stakeholders. And so at the core of our work is a multi-stakeholder collaborative approach to help us in obtaining that data, because sometimes getting data from government can be challenging. And we have developers who are working in these local communities. They have very local, deep knowledge and understanding of the communities where they work. And we rely a lot on the information that they provide, because if it's a developer that wants to set up, for example, a solar mini-grid, they would have to do a feasibility study, talk with the community, find out what are their needs and their requirements. And so that information is very vital for us to help us in assessing the need and knowing whether the financing instruments will be applicable or not. The fragility mapping by the World Bank is also another starting point that we use. And in terms of the key focus criteria that we look at, of course, there's that fragility index looking at energy poverty levels. We find that most of these FCS countries are the ones that are least electrified and have a need, and they're very climate vulnerable. So those three key criteria are very important for us. Partnership with other organizations working in these locations. We have international organizations, local organizations. So as an example, international organizations, we have UN agencies, and in many of these FCS countries, some of them have their peacekeeping missions there, lots of humanitarian work going on, and partnering with them because they are based in those locations. They understand better the needs of the communities, helps provide us with key information that we require. We also publish, based on this information, we also go ahead and do research and publish reports. And these are available on our website, country reports that provide the state of energy access in each of these countries. Recently, we launched one for the Central African Republic. And so, that information is out there in the public, available to other people that also want to go there. We, depending on the circumstances, we also rely on technology providers. Where it comes to installations, electrification installations, because of meter readings, they have to install technology that is able to relay information remotely. Thank God for that. And so that also provides us with important data sets that helps us to be able to address this gap of information.
Thank you very much, Linda. This is very informative. Actually, I would like to come back to you about Peace Renewable Energy Grids. It's really very smart and innovative. We need to hear from you about this, but I like very much your context in this sense, as you just explained. So before going to Kristen, I would like to ask all colleagues here to look for the current poll in the system and to tell us what is the most barrier that you see hindering and challenging the promotion of renewable energy transition. Is that basically coup d'etat? Is that currency risk? Or is that local capacity gap? Or finally, the national instability? So you can access this from the poll, and please give your answers while we continue with the discussion. Now, let me go back again to Kristen. Kristen, you are a developer, but also you are one of the management of Kube Energy. So we are very much interested, as you are a developer specifically, and within Kube as well, to let us know how you consider and deal with such kind of very complicated FCV situation while doing and promoting renewable energy. Kristen, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, I have two hats. As you can see on the screen, I'm also working for PeaceNexus as a business engagement lead, but also as I have a foot in the Kube Energy. So I'll kind of like gonna use my two hats to, come up with like very tangible examples of the work of Kube Energy and also a bit more strategic on what PeaceNexus does. But maybe just let's say a quick word about Kube Energy. I think, Kube Energy is a renewable energy services company, headquartered in Norway. But what makes unique about this, Kube Energy is that the staff has the background from, the humanitarian, the development, and also the World Bank. So it's kind of like a very diverse background of staffs that makes, people very knowledgeable of of complex situations. And I think, this has really helped us to really develop projects in various locations, and especially in Africa, but in Somalia, Central African Republics, Mali, and also South Sudan. And I think we develop on medium-sized power plants, so really developing renewable energy infrastructure in this location. And importantly, we don't necessarily, often developers do, we don't, build and walk away. We develop to stay. I think we're operating as an IPP in these countries, and we really have a skin in the game, as we said, through our resources that we implement. I mean, we spend into this development of this project. But I think it's quite different because it's one of the features that is quite critical when you're developers in this context. So let me go back to your question. I think let me start with a few misconceptions that we need to debunk about fragile and conflict areas. And I think there is really a disconnect between perceived risk and real risk on the ground. And I think too often this, and I think that's the point that Linda raised, there is a lack of knowledge on the context, and there is a lack of data. There is definitely a huge data gaps there. And so I think this requires you as a developer to really have a very different approach when you start developing project. But I think I'm not saying that there is no risk, but the risks are quite dynamics. And I think in that sense, the fact that they are not uniform, even if you start understanding one country, you really need to go very deeper. For instance, we have developed a project in Baidoa. I mean, the dynamic in Baidoa in Somalia is quite different than Mogadishu. It's a different, setting, and I think it requires you to be really on the ground. And I think I think the perceptions of this risk become one of the bigger barriers to invest in this country. And I think that's why I think it's quite important. And yesterday there was a very interesting session about creating a local value in investing. And I think the term decolonize came a few times. And I think that's, it starts with that, how you can really deconstruct also this negative narrative around fragile and conflict areas, and how you can really decolonize this narrative and focus on the opportunities and how you can sort of overcome or manage these risks. That's one point. And I think, navigating complex settings, it's not necessarily about avoiding the risk. It's trying to understand what is the risk and how you can mitigate that. And I think there are a few things that are quite important here. It's really, and I'm not going to say it's a recipe for success, but 3 important elements that we in Kube we try to apply all the time is proximity and context awareness. You really need a boot on the ground. You really need people on the ground to understand that. And I think it's not necessarily only the physical presence, but you need to really tailor how you engage with the stakeholders. That's quite important. I think Luis made a very good setting of the scene. It's the conflict-sensitive design. And I'm not going to talk about this because it has been already said, but you really need to, it's not only just necessarily about do no harm. It's try to understand how you can provide this peace building, sort of requirements within your design of your project, and ensuring that you really sort of instigate more stability in your investment and provide some social benefits to everyone. And I think as a developer, but also for investors, you really need to be quite creative and adapt quite well to this context. I think it's not a plug and play environment. You cannot come up with your very perfect checklist and believe that you can go over that and sort of say, all right, we need this document to get this financing. No, it's not like that. This isn't business as usual in fragile context. And I think you need really to sort of understand the requirements and what it takes. And one concrete example, for instance, when we were developing the project in Somalia, there was a requirement from investors, foreign investors, but also others to have a license, which is quite basic, in standard settings. But the license in Baidoa, first there was no regulation in place. The regulation is quite new. It was from last year. But when we started the project, there was no regulation at the federal level. At the state level, the only thing that they were provided is like a document saying Kube Energy has the right to operate. But it doesn't mean anything, in terms of distribution, in terms of generation, what are the conditions, etc. So we had to sit with the government to develop a template for them. It's not, it's not a requirement from a developer, but this is what the kind of things that you have to do when you're on the ground to make sure that at the same time you meet some international standards that doesn't necessarily is required at the state level in Somalia, just to make sure that the project is also bankable. And I think, the bottom line here is really to investing in fragile setting is definitely possible, and we have done it, but it just takes the right mindset to develop that. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I think in the second round, we need to have some concrete example. I really wanted to have the audience feel projects in that sense. Nadiia, I have to say that I love your country very much, and I appreciate what you're doing. We all know that Ukraine is ongoing active conflict country. And I myself, as one of the IRENA team, been going with you over the past year for several investment opportunity, and I know how your company as SPP, you're trying your best to do this. Can you please let us know, how do you see the interest of the investors trying to do something in Ukraine as current active and growing active conflict country? But more importantly, how do you see and how do you navigate this context within Ukraine? Thank you, Nadiia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Before I answer your questions, I would like to say big thanks for the organizers. It is a big privilege to be here in such an important discussion with such distinguished experts and honored guests. And back to your questions. Absolutely, working in war zone brings enormous challenges for us. In peaceful time, it is a renewable energy project usually requires complex coordination. And during the war, that requirements and challenges multiply, because the infrastructure can be damaged, supply chains become unpredictable, and for sure, investors naturally become more cautious. But during the wartime, we definitely understand and we definitely know that energy, it is essential needs. It is about full-scale food, healthcare. It is about another essential needs which people definitely need despite the war and during the war really needed. That's why we don't stop, we adapt. First of all, we have some practical tools. Use political war risk insurance from such institutions like MIGA, like DFC. It's bring for our international partners more confident position to be involved in Ukrainian energy project. But except that instrument and tools, it is about mindset. We definitely know why we do this. That's why we build first, we plan first, and we stay more flexible. And with big support of our international institutions, with our foreign partners, our results show and speak themselves. During the war, Ukraine delivered about 2 gigawatts new generation capacity of renewables. And this is a result about wartime period. It is impossible to achieve such result without support, incredible support which we have from a lot of international institutions, a lot of international partners, and with companies that were in Ukraine before the war. They also continue their work in Ukraine because they see that support and that partnership with Ukraine received today. And this helps us to keep lights on, and this helps us to deliver electricity during such a crisis period in our country. And it's also help us to show the investors that it is enormous challenges, it is enormous difficult settings. It's impossible to find something more difficult than war. But if we can still keep lines on during the war, it means that when we post-war reconstruction and peaceful, they definitely will achieve more in our country than in other places. And it's also help us to stay more strong, and it's also help us to move forward our project right now.
Thank you very much, Nadiia. I think this is very inspiring, and we need to come back to you to let us know how did you navigate this during the wartime, and how do you close the gap between the local capacity and the interest of the partners to see very robust bankable projects. But we'll come back to you in the second round for this. Ms. Jisung Won, MIGA is our ETAF partner. And actually, we know that you are globally unique in covering war risk, not all other financing institutions doing this, and that's globally important. And we also witnessed with the current good management of the World Bank that you are providing more tools for mitigating risks. Can you please let us know and walk us through all these type of new mitigation and de-risking tools along energy transition? And thank you very much, Ms. Jisung. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Broadly speaking, there are 3 categories of insurance products that MIGA provide. First, MIGA provides political risk insurance to private sector investors, both equity sponsor and the debt financing for the banks in IPP and PPP projects in emerging countries. So MIGA political risk protects the foreign investors from the risk of breach of contract by the government, war and civil disturbance risk, currency inconvertibility and transfer restriction, and expropriation. Second, MIGA provides the credit enhancement guarantee to support long-term commercial financing for public sector projects. MIGA's credit enhancement guarantee allows the government and the SOEs rated BB- or better to borrow from commercial banks at better terms. Third, MIGA provides trade finance guarantee to support short-term trade-related financing for public sector entities in emerging countries. As you may know, in July 2024, the World Bank Group Guarantee Platform was created to consolidate all guarantee products from MIGA, World Bank, and IFC under one roof of MIGA. This allows MIGA to provide integrated menu of guarantee products, leveraging the balance sheet and the capabilities of 3 World Bank Group institutions. As an important way to scale up MIGA support, I would like to give you a few examples of how MIGA is leveraging partnership with other MDBs, donor countries, and regional development banks. So as a first example, I want to explain what we have done in Ukraine. So as my fellow panelist Nadiia just explained, MIGA continued to support Ukraine even after war, thanks to the trust fund provided by the donor countries. This trust fund is called SureTF. It has an anchor donor country, as Japan as an anchor donor country, and also supported by countries such as Norway and United States. And we are in the process of increasing the SureTF, from more and more donor countries so that we can continue to support Ukraine. So during the ongoing war in Ukraine, this SureTF is being used as a first loss layer or reinsurance for the MIGA guarantee program issuance so that we can also mitigate the risk to ourselves. MIGA has also established partnership with various MDBs who are actively supporting Ukraine, such as EBRD. MIGA, for example, MIGA entered an agreement with EBRD to issue 10 million guarantee, trade finance guarantee to EBRD as a guarantee holder of MIGA cover so that EBRD can provide the trade finance to state-owned banks in Ukraine. So MIGA support enabled EBRD to increase its trade limit in Ukraine, thereby supporting the flow of critical goods such as energy product, food, and medical supplies. The second example that I want to explain is in Africa. MIGA provided the credit enhancement guarantee to commercial banks so that they can support their lending, they can provide the lending to the regional development banks in Africa, such as West African Development Bank or BOAD. The MIGA-backed financing supported the BOAD's lending operation towards sustainable and climate projects, including the renewable energy projects in its member countries in the West African Economic and Monetary Union. All 8 member countries of BOADs are either IDA countries and or the FCS countries. This approach allowed MIGA to mobilize the long-term funding for the regional development banks that are credit-worthy and hence eligible for the MIGA credit enhancement guarantee, and help those RDBs to on-lend the funds to business in IDA and FCS countries which are not eligible for the MIGA credit enhancement guarantee. MIGA also supported TDB, the Eastern and Southern Africa Trade Development Bank, with the same guarantee structure so that TDB can on-lend the funds to its 22 member countries, including Sudan that you earlier mentioned. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jisung. And we need to hear more from you about the lessons learned for the partnership that you do with IRENA and other banks, with some specific cases, I think, in the second round for that. Reda, I think I will start, as you recommended me before, with the second part of the question for second round, because I think it's very important to start with this. I realize that you're right, I was wrong, that you are coming, number one, you are basically our partner under ETAF. Second, you are coming with a very unique product that you provide early stage equity financing and project preparation cost for your member country in Africa. And this is really very unique and very important. Can you please let us know about this and how can this help increasing and speeding up energy transition within the unique modality of Africa 50? I really appreciate that. And again, I have to admit that you're right. I was wrong that we have to start with this part with you. Reda, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. That's a very important question, actually. So maybe I'll just start by briefly introducing Africa 50, and then I'll touch base on how our investment vehicles work to bridge the bankability gap in Africa. So for those who don't know Africa 50, we are an investment platform and an asset manager established by the African Development Bank, along with 32 shareholder countries, as well as 2 central banks in Africa. Our core mission is to bridge the funding gap in the infrastructure space by developing and investing in high-impact projects, commercially viable infrastructure projects that can attract private capital at scale. We have a dual mandate, so we need to deliver development impact while at the same time ensuring financial returns for our shareholders and co-investors. We focus on sectors such as energy, including generation, transmissions, ICT, data centers, transport, and also some social infrastructure sectors such as healthcare and education in the African continent. Now coming back to your question and to explain how our vehicles work to bridge the bankability gap in the continent, this is mainly due to our organizational model, as we have 2 core complementary vehicles, which are the Africa 50 Project Development and Africa 50 Project Finance. And this allows us to cover the whole value chain of the infrastructure investment from concept to financial close. And then we also invest equity to operate the assets and to remain a shareholder. So for the Africa 50 Project Development Vehicle, this one focuses on early stage development activities. And this is a stage of a project where typically private investors are very reluctant to invest because there is a high risk, long timelines, and they're not really willing to take this kind of risks. So we co-develop projects along with governments, with local developers in Africa, also international private developers who are willing to take this kind of risk. And we're not just funding studies and development activities, but where we have a very active role in terms of shaping the project, structuring it to make it bankable, and GFIs are willing to finance this kind of project. We also, during this development stage, we're also trying to design robust PPP frameworks and concession models. So we work alongside government to make sure that these structures are in place so that the private sector are willing to invest later on. Then we have the project finance vehicle, which comes in once the project is ready for financial close, and they invest equity and quasi-equity to take minority stake alongside international investors. And then this equity is used to fund construction works. And once the asset is operational, we remain a shareholder with a large horizon of time. So this seamless transition between concept to financing is actually a powerful feature because it ensures continuity and it signals to the private sector that Africa 50 has skin on the game from concept to implementation. And this is very important because it brings confidence and it provides some comfort to private investors. Well, all in all, I mean, we have noticed that when these structures are in place, meaning that you have a credible partner involved from the development stage until financial close, and then you have another vehicle coming in to remain a shareholder after financial close to manage the construction period and the first years of operations. When this is in place, we've noticed that private sectors are more willing to come in Africa.
Thank you very much, Reda. We need to come back to give us more examples as lessons learned for your projects in Africa. We all know that sub-Saharan Africa is a big challenge, and there's a lot of FCV situation there that you handle, and you do that successfully. And we're very proud to have you with us in IRENA as ETA partner. Thank you, Reda. We come back to you.
Thank you.
Anja, we always keep the best for the last. So, and you're working one of the most challenging and demanding need as EnDev within GIZ, which is clean cooking, and you are the component lead. And handling this specifically with the brave African women, which we all very proud of. Can you please let us know how you handle demand and supply challenges within this very sensitive environment and within the African families? Anja, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Ahmed. So let me briefly introduce EnDev to you. EnDev, or Energizing Development, is a global program working on energy access in 20 countries. It's funded by 4 core donors: Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Norway. The most fragile countries we work in include Mali, Niger, DRC, and Ethiopia, where I'm based. And despite the challenges that have been mentioned by my fellow panelists, EnDev uses a market-based approach where possible, because this supports structural and self-sustaining change in market development. In terms of technologies, we work on off-grid solar electrification and clean cooking, and we work with households, businesses, and social infrastructures. So to come back to your question, how do we manage demand and supply challenges? I would like to highlight one tool that we use at EnDev, which is results-based financing. We use it in 14 countries, focusing on scalable and inclusive approaches. So for instance, in the Tigray region in Ethiopia, we use supply-side results-based financing to support local solar distributors, which helped to de-risk the market and made it viable for these companies to operate, and then at the same time bringing affordable solar products to the conflict-affected communities. On the demand side, to address the affordability gap in such a context, we also implement demand-side RBF, or demand-side subsidies. That means subsidizing part of the end-user price, and especially for low-income households. One key advantage of RBF is basically its flexibility, which allows us to adapt to the constantly changing conditions on the ground. Another strategy is to build local capacity, for instance, setting up stove production groups or training local technicians, maintenance teams to ensure supply chains are sustained and also to create jobs. And most importantly, as already mentioned also by the other panelists, strong partnerships with local governments and local actors who know the risk best and the context best help us navigate these challenges.
Thank you very much. Actually, this is also very inspiring, and we really wanted to hear from you about the other stream of your work about mini grids. We'll come back to you in the second round. Just colleagues, please let's try to look at the time, because we still have one final round of questions plus also one general question. So I would encourage you all to limit our intervention for 2 minutes. So basically, Linda, I'm very interested to know about this initiative and this specific piece, renewable energy credits. It's really, for me, very inspiring, because I was basically yesterday, in the coming 2 days, I will be involved in the official discussion with the UNFCCC about carbon credits and Article 6. So I really wanted to know, and if there is any opportunity for us to see how can we scale that up, not only in Africa, but also globally around the areas and the countries for FCVs. If you can please let us know about this important piece, renewable energy credits, we appreciate that. Over to you, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you. So as an organization, Energy Peace Partners, we are a non-profit, And our work with this instrument called the Peace Renewable Energy Credit, let me start by providing a background on what exactly it is. So when it comes to carbon accounting, corporates have different instruments that they can use to be able to account for their carbon footprint. And when it comes to electricity consumption by organizations, often they buy power from their local grid, or whoever the grid supplier is. And if it comes from a dirty grid and they have made commitments to transition to renewables, and they're not in a position to install that renewable, there is an instrument that is known as a renewable energy credit, which that organization can buy and be able to make those claims. And so for us, and given the context where we work across Africa, there are no local instruments that can be used. And you have to use an instrument that is globally recognized, globally acceptable, and can be transacted across borders. And so we rely on what is called the International Renewable Energy Credit, and this is issued by the ITRAC Standards Foundation. And one IREC, so in short, the International Renewable Energy Credit, one IREC is the equivalent of 1 megawatt hour of electricity that is generated from a renewable source. And as EPP, what we have done is gone a step further because our focus is on these FCS countries. We have created a label which we call the Peace Renewable Energy Credit, in short, the PREC. And this label is, we did that deliberately to be able to bring attention to these FCS settings and how challenging it is, and therefore be able to drive additional investments, meaningful investment into these settings, because also the volumes that are coming from those locations are not very high. And so 1 megawatt hour of generation is the equivalent of 1 credit, and a certificate can be issued on that registry to and somebody buys. So as a project developer, if you own the asset and you're producing electricity, every megawatt hour you produce, there's also a virtual commodity that you're producing called the credit or a certificate, which you can sell to organizations and they buy. So it's a market that exists. So these clean energy markets have previously not existed in Africa. They are, the instruments has been used for many years in Europe, the US, different states have their own instruments, and Africa has not had this. And therefore, by opening up these markets and using these instruments, our aim is to be able to drive new renewable investments into projects, and in a way, also de-risk, because if a developer is able to be able to use these attributes and get additional money, that means there's more money. It reduces their stress a bit. Just to let you know that we are in the process of launching a facility that we call the PREC aggregation facility, and this is in the initial pilot phase. Is going to be an $11 million facility that will be able to buy this, sign forward contracts with project developers and buy these certificates in advance of selling them. So there's an entity in between that will be holding them and make a commitment to purchase them over a long period of time, but pay you the money upfront, because a big challenge that developers face is capital financing for new projects. And often you find a developer, when they're going to look for, in a basket of financing, there are different tools. Some of them are asked for equity, or whatever other, but this is an innovative instrument that project developers can also access and be able to add on to that basket of money that they're raising to be able to build new renewables. This facility is a few months away from launching, but we see that as a big way of addressing this challenge, because again, the way the clean energy markets work is a certificate can only be issued after the generation. And so if we are to wait for developers to build and then issue those certificates, it means that there's a time gap in between. And by this facility being able to pay developers upfront and then wait for you to start generation, and as you're generating, then we will be selling at that future point. It's a big risk. But we believe that these kind of innovative instruments are needed in the sector to be able to attract as many sources of funding as possible. What we have done is we've already proven the case. There are successful PREC transactions, if I may say. The first ones were issued from a project in the DRC by a developer known as Nuru, and Microsoft was able to purchase these certificates, and they have used them. There have been other transactions. We are limited of time, but just to show that there is demand from companies. And by having these certificates issued, then we are helping to open the market. Apart from issuing the certificates, we find ourselves in a unique situation because we have to play multiple roles. We have to play multiple roles in order to open up the markets. So one, we've developed the instrument, and so are the exclusive issue of the PREC. And on this standard that we rely on, the International Renewable Energy Credit Standard, requires that every country must have a framework that recognizes the use of that instrument. And so we also liaise with governments to be able for them to allow the use of these instruments in their country. And in many cases, we find that sometimes people are not even aware that this exists. So, there's that socialization, knowledge sharing that you have to start by creating, and then now get that approval. The country becomes an IREC issuing country for us to be able to issue that certificate. And at the same time, we also have to work towards finding buyers. So, we are working on the supply side, getting developers to issue the credits. We are also in the middle, verifying and authorizing the issuance. And on the other side, we are also building a market, because if a developer issues the credits and there's nobody to buy them, it also doesn't, ultimately translate to any benefit. So we are also building that market. And in the process of building the market, I must also add that this instrument, also, many companies that report using the greenhouse gas protocol rely on these standards, and you find that within the rules that exist right now, many countries in Africa are limited because the applications come with rules and regulations. And so we've also gone ahead and fortunately we have the standards are now being reviewed. We sit within the technical working group of the greenhouse gas protocol, which I represent, and we are working to get the rules that recognize, the unique context of markets in Africa, electricity markets in Africa, because if you limit to one geography, that means that the market will not be opened up as much. And so we also play that additional role where, other than at national level policy, we are now also engaging with the standards to be able to take into account these very disadvantaged settings and be able to open up the market. If we're talking about climate change and just energy transition, then we need to make sure that everybody is being carried along on that journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think I'm looking to my colleagues really if we can connect with Linda, because this is something important. We have other countries on the other side of the world that will benefit from this. But thank you, Linda. Kristen, we would like to hear from you within the context of this Insight report for Peace Movement and PeaceNexus. How can you benefit this, contextualize or put the context for enhancing investment and co-blended finance along the peace investment de-risking projects? It's an initiative that I know that you lead and you are very unique onto this. So please, if you can give us some kind of insights and lessons learned, we appreciate that very much. Floor is yours, Kristen. Thank you.
No, thanks. So as I already said a few words about Kube Energy, now I'm going to say a few words about PeaceNexus. But PeaceNexus is a private Swiss foundation, and we have the luxury to have a single funding stream with a private individual, so it gave us a lot of independence on how we work. But the mandates and the business engagement mandate that we have is really to support investors and companies to integrate this conflict sensitivity approach so they can become more responsible in their business practices. And it's really to encourage more like responsible investment in fragile and conflict areas. And I think we also have a very unique position that we also not just advising, but also invest. So as an asset owner, we invest in public and private markets. And so we use this also as a leverage to really promote this agenda of peace building within the company as an investor, as a shareholder. Yeah, we touch a bit about, some of the instruments, including blended financing or peace positive investment. And I think, this is not only about, risk mitigation. I think it's really about building trust and legitimacy of the project. And I think what we have seen that if you look at the sort of like the set of risks, it's not only financial, it's also social, political, legal, reputational risks. And I think, this kind of support, blending financing or peace positive investment framework, if can work quite well if they are sort of integrated at the early stage of the project. So they can help the developers to really absorb the sort of like uncertainty that, these environments come with. And I think it really helps, the developers to not necessarily invest all their equities, in the project development, which is what we did as Kube Energy. And at that time, the PREC facility and with an upfront payment was not available, which would have been great if we could have used that. But I think it put like most of the developers in a very difficult and risky liquidity situation. And that's why most of the time developers are quite, kind of like shy away from this context, because it's very risky to put like all, these resources in developing project where there are still a lot of uncertainty if it's going to come up, it's going to work. So blended financing made that possible. And that's quite important. And I think if you integrate this peace positive investment framework into your how you structure the financing, I think it kind of like signal a long-term commitment also, not only for the investors, but also to the stakeholders, the local stakeholders. I think you really want to make sure that they don't see your project as a sort of like a short-term extractive play, where they feel that you're just going to come and take something out of them and then leave. So there are a couple of like very, interesting examples that Luis already touched also. But like, for instance, in 2 or 3 projects that we have an early transfer of assets. So we know that, we need a certain time to actually pay back, the investment, and then we make some returns. But like after 10 or 15 years, we're going to transfer the assets to the local authorities. That makes, quite, a lucrative transaction for the authorities, because they see that in 10 years, if the project goes well, and they have to make sure that it goes well, otherwise, they're not going to get the asset, they will generate revenues, not only from the taxes, etc., but from the actual assets after that. And I think that's one of the interesting points. But I think the problem is that sometimes there is a bit too much. I mean, the conversation is a lot about like how you de-risk, what are the best in financial instruments. And I think, again, don't get me wrong, these tools matters and we use them a lot. But I think you only address the perceived risk and you only protect the investors. But I think what has worked quite well, and I think that's what we're trying to promote also at PeaceNexus, is really to more looking at the real de-risking through a sort of like an upstream approach. You need to invest in the local capacities. There are a lot of businesses that are investable in spirit, but are not yet investment ready. Yeah. And I think you need to really provide the support that they need to actually get to the situation where they're investment ready. And I think what has made a big difference is you need patient capital in all this process. You need investors that understand that it will take much more time. I think one of the panelists mentioned that, but projects in fragile contexts, take 5 times longer, and sometimes could cost even 5 times more expensive. And I think you need investors that understand that, and they need to really embark in this journey with you. Like it's an accompaniment, it's technical assistance, it's a full package that is required.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I liked very much your terminology about patient capital. I just would like to highlight this terminology. It's for me very new, but it's really very important. It really happens. So thank you very much, Kristen. So Nadiia, you're always a case at spot. We appreciate very much your strengths as Ukrainian government, as Ukrainian developer. We all know, even within IRENA, is that local capacity from the recipient government to come up with a standard that help investors to invest in energy transition is not an easy situation. It's always very challenging, even in normal situation. But in FCV is becoming more harder. How do you see that as a renewable energy developer in Ukraine? And how do you handle this situation within the current growing conflict in Ukraine? And what do you expect from developers and international organization, MDBs, to give you support? I know it's a very complicated question, but please try to help us because we really would like to help your country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I will try. First, I would like to emphasize that Ukraine entered to the war with a strong foundation. Before the conflict, Ukrainian developers already had delivered numbers of renewable projects. Many were financed by EFC, EBRD, and another financial institutions. And Ukrainian developers had experience how to meet international standards and also had experience how to build projects and how to make projects reliable from technical, engineering, financial, and legal compliance side. And when the war began, that experience hasn't gone anywhere. And when the war began, we received biggest and incredible support from knowledge sharing, from technical support, and peer-to-peer engagement from foreign institutions, from local banks, from companies that were in Ukrainian market long time before the war. And since that, and through that, we continue to deliver reliable, robust, and bankable projects. With this regards, I consider that the technical gaps and financing gaps, it is not a biggest barrier. We also have a strong fund supported from different stakeholders. EBRD, IFC, as mentioned, and a lot of another DFIs from local companies. Right now, EBRD is developing price guarantee fund for new investment in Ukraine. But the biggest barrier, it is risk. That's why political risk mechanism and financial blending mechanism are essential. And how to support and how to enhance support for local development, I would recommend several things. First, it's build trust with long-term partnerships with someone who were reliable before and continue to be today. Next is expand access to de-risk mechanism. This will allow local players to keep project and to move forward. And the last one is to create co-development platform where our local partners and international partners can share not only capital, but also responsibility and making decision on day one. This is really important to do during the wartime. It will help to achieve result even in challenging settings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadiia. I think it's very innovative. And again, I'm looking at my colleague Marta and Faye. We need to discuss that with Nadiia because this is really very important because we are having ongoing initiative in partnership with UNEP and we need to see how can we take that specifics coming from private sector developers like yours. But thank you, Nadiia. Jisung, MIGA is one of our key partners for ETAF. And when I joined IRENA, I found very good initiatives that already in action and is now moving, but it would be very important. It's called Sustainable Renewables Mitigation Initiative, SRMI. And this one basically looks at what kind of risks that partners like MIGA would work on mitigating them. We'd appreciate very much if you give some guys of highlights about some key examples about this initiative and how can we take that further within FCV context. Jisung, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Just sitting in this panel discussion today, like in the middle of this panel, I realized that MIGA has been essentially working with, all of the panelists in either directly or indirectly.
You are. Yes, we are, actually.
So as I mentioned, we supported Ukraine and we supported the, clean cooking by supporting the carbon credit, the first time in Africa. And also we work with the Kube Energy and we're working with Africa 50. So it's very interesting.
And don't forget that Mr. Tafares is coming now, the VP for IFC coming from MIGA. Yeah. He's my friend. Yeah. Thank you very much. He's a really very good one.
Indeed, MIGA is, working very actively, supporting, very actively in Africa and supporting private sector investments, in Africa. So speaking first of the Sustainable Renewable Mitigation Initiative, SRMI, that is in partnership with IRENA. This facility is basically similar to the SURE TF that I mentioned earlier, in the sense that it is a risk-sharing facility that allows MIGA to mitigate its own risk while it can and allow MIGA to expand its guarantee coverage, and hence the role of these risk-sharing facilities are really critical in scaling up MIGA support of private investment. So just sharing a little bit more about the lessons learned from our support for the Africa project. I saw the survey very interestingly, and basically the challenges that we also face in supporting Africa projects are, really broad. It includes the stressed macro indicators, FX constraints, political instability, weak state-owned enterprise, limitation of government support, high operating cost, lack of investment, and climate vulnerability. So this only means that there is always a strong demand for the MIGA support. And the MIGA as well as World Bank Group is really working together across the energy value chain to help Africa tackle these challenges and meet its energy needs. As you may have heard, one of the important and recent initiative of the World Bank Group is actually what we call M300. It is an initiative where World Bank Group and AFDB have committed to connect 300 million Africans to electricity by 2030. So I just want to give you a quick example of how MIGA is supporting this M300 initiative by adapting it the way it provides its guarantee to meet the needs of distributed renewable energy, or DRE segment. One of the key challenges that we find in Africa energy sector is the issue of low connectability and reliability. To scale up connections, we find that it's important to expand access to energy, not only through on-grid solutions, but also through off-grid solutions. Hence, there is increasing focus on distributed renewable energy sector, or DRE sector, to increase affordable last mile access to energy. So we have so far, closed 9 transactions to support DRE sector. And what we have learned is DRE companies are different in the sense that they have a lot of small, distinct sub-projects that are bundled under one single project company and that are implemented in phased manner. And hence, we have developed this new approach called portfolio approach. It's essentially processing portfolio of DRE projects simultaneously versus separately for each individual project. So we do so by upfront due diligence, not only on each of the project, but also more importantly, we focus on the guarantee holders, systems, policies, and procedures and their capability to implement these projects in accordance with the MIGA standards. And we rely on their contractual commitments and rely on the monitoring as well. And we basically secured upfront approval, and we standardize our documentation process so that it is more efficient process for the investors. So I'll just stop here.
Thank you, Jisung, for this. Actually, the decentralized renewable energy is really one of the very important tools that not only fits for African context, but also for Ukraine, because this will increase the resilience for any kind of possible aggression. This is what we call it, passive resilience measures that would help a lot of FCV countries. So, Reda, I think go back to our beloved continent, Africa. We realize very much that you are facing, as Africa 50, huge set of risks, not only about FCV, but also including within FCV the ongoing corruption and lack of capacity within the continent. So if you can give us quickly some of the examples about how you address this within your equity investment and early support to your projects, we appreciate that very much. Over to you. Thank you, Reda.
Thank you, Ahmed. So this is actually a very important question. Well, actually at Africa 50, we understand that perceptions of risks are often exaggerated in the African context, particularly around political instability and corruption. Unfortunately, we noticed that these perceptions persist despite significant improvement in many African countries in terms of regulatory framework, governance, and macroeconomic environment. And this is why, for us at Africa 50, there are three key features that we use to effectively address these perceived risks. So the first one is our deep local insight and strong government relationship. As I mentioned before, Africa 50 shareholding is composed of AFDB and African shareholder countries and central banks in Africa. So this gives us a privileged insight into country context. We also work closely with the public stakeholders to understand the political dynamics. And this allows us to distinguish between headline risks and actual risks that might really impact project viability. The second key feature, and which is the most important one for me, is to, when structuring a project, when developing a project, is to make sure that there is a robust risk-sharing mechanism in place. And this is actually one of Africa 50's core strengths, which lies into our ability to leverage strategic partnerships to reduce and mitigate these often overstated risks that we see in Africa. And we do so by working closely with governments, for example, de-risking projects upstream. As Africa 50, we do project development, so we take early stage development risks, and this is important to make sure that development priorities are aligned with governments, and also to reduce and mitigate later stage risk of delays or even reversals, for example, when there is a coup in some jurisdiction, at least the foundations are there and we are able to continue the development even if there is a change in the government that is in place. And this happens for us in many circumstances where we've been involved in development, interaction with the government, and there is a coup and the government changes, so we need to rebuild the relationship to make sure that what we have started in terms of development can continue to financial close and provide comfort to private sector. When funding and raising funding for this project, we also work closely with DFIs, which usually provides financing under a project finance scheme, and this structure requires to have key bankability requirements in place, which translates into strong credit enhancement proposed by government in partnership with institutions like MIGA and the likes. And this also provides some comfort to private sectors, despite that some risk can be perceived as like political instability. But when we have this in place, this clearly facilitate the process to financial close. And when developing this project, we don't do that alone. We also work with the local developers and sometimes with the technical international developers. So by doing this, we're not just bringing in capital, but also world-class technical and operational and financial expertise, which increases the quality of execution, hence providing comfort to the private community. So these are these three features which are very important. And lastly, on the corruption front, I would like to say that governance and transparency are at the heart of our model as Africa 50. So we make sure that we apply rigorous procurement, ESG standards and compliance rules that are aligned with international best practices. Additionally, by being involved in the development of the project, not only financing, so we are in a position to shape the governance framework of the project from the onset, from the very early stages, ensuring that accountability and credibility are in place throughout the project lifecycle. So, I mean, all in all, we've seen that when we have these key features in place, the private sector is more willing to come in despite some perceived risks such as political instability. In some countries, we've seen that some private actors are willing to come to invest when we are able to put all this in place.
Thank you very much, Reda. I really like what you mentioned about the early stage risk-sharing mechanisms. It really fits with all what you're saying for the other measures you do. But thank you very much, Reda. Anja, if you can please let us know about within these small mini-grids and decentralized solutions, how can you make attraction to the African entrepreneurs, again, within the clean cooking stream that you are leading, and how this will increase the scale-up of access to clean energy, specifically to our beloved African women? Thank you. Over to you, Anja.
Thank you very much. I think most of us agree that the main challenge is risk or perceived risk. And one of the key strategies we found effective is to de-risk through pilots. At EnDev, we, as already mentioned, we piloted both results-based financing and demand-side subsidies in various fragile countries. And these pilots basically provide some evidence on what works, and then it can be used to involve larger partners and unlock greater resources. So one good example is our partnership with the World Bank. In Rwanda, the World Bank scaled up EnDev's poor approach and eventually reached 370,000 households. This shows what is possible when early coordination happens between programs like EnDev and then multilateral players. And then this enables also to achieve economies of scale and access additional financing. Based on this model in Rwanda, we also expanded our partnership with the World Bank and into a dedicated demand-side subsidy component, where we pilot demand-side subsidies in Malawi, Liberia, and Niger. And this work is coordinated through a technical working group, which is called End User Subsidy Lab, which includes not only donors, but also sector associations and foundations. And it's becoming a hub for knowledge sharing and also replication beyond just EnDev and the World Bank. And as a second strategy, we also work with local banks, which is very critical, also building their capacity for energy lending or even to implement subsidy schemes directly, since, again, they know the risk best in these settings. And finally, we also need to look beyond financing. So especially when we talk about scaling up, this needs a supportive enabling environment, meaning national policies, regulatory frameworks, and political buy-in that supports this long-term and sustainable market development.
Thank you very much, Anja. I think we basically exceeded the time allocated for the third round, so I'm looking for our respected audience in case you have any questions. but actually I understand now that there is also some kind of new Slido questions. So I would appreciate really to look at this and to see that there is a lot of questions coming under the Slido here, and basically if we can give some kind of what role do direct investment versus capacity building plays a role in the fragile and conflict situation countries. We received 4 likes. And what role do direct investment also, how to shift the status quo bankability mentality to see finance vehicles for peace building when evaluating investment? And also, I do see that what action can we take to deconstruct narratives that helps us to develop the right mindset for addressing structural challenges? And the next question is that what about 41 different currency in Africa? What does the panel think about having more regional monetary zone to unlock more investment for projects? Let me start with this last one, because it's really, for me, very attracting. And I would like to start to give my views on this part in less than 60 seconds. That's really a $1 trillion, not $1 billion question. Tell me, even within BRICS, how can these countries able to change the currency into one? It's really, if somebody tells me about this, let's keep in mind that the Bretton Woods Agreement that unify the global world for one currency for exchange is now leading everything. And even with if we add petrodollar, that's to unify everything to exchange for the petrol to dollar, that's only the one that governing the whole world. So changing all of this, how many Bretton Woods we need? Only for Africa. If somebody tells me, let me know. I stop here. I don't know if the panelists will have anything. By the way, I'm not talking politics. I'm just talking economics. Thank you. Over to you all. My colleagues, if you have anything, please. I see. Please. Kristen.
No, thanks. Maybe to just react on that, the bankability mentality and peace building in general. I think, I mean, in the work that we do at PeaceNexus, for instance, it's not necessarily to sell, peace building as a product. That's not the plan here. I think it's try to make sure that investors and companies actually integrate this conflict lens, so peace lens, into their business practices. So they understand that, there is this double materiality. Businesses also impact conflict dynamics, and conflict dynamics impact businesses. And so you need to understand this and integrate this lens to make sure that you don't have a negative impact on dynamics. And, hopefully that you have a positive impact. And I think this is where there is difference between investing in peace building and sort of having this conflict lens. And I think deconstruct the narrative, it's all about having also a good project in the pipeline that we can showcase. And I think most of the time also there are already a lot of good stories. And I think the backbone of the economy in these locations are the SMEs. And the SMEs that actually, go through this, I'll say, uncertain time and resist and still, providing opportunities. And I think my last word is that, in fragile contexts, we don't win. I mean, we don't win with, sort of being fast. You win when you stay in the long term and you commit.
Thank you, Kristen. I don't know if one of the panelists would like to add anything to any of this. Reda, please. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe to the question around having more regional monetary zones in Africa.
Yes.
So from my experience, I don't really think that this is really the issue about unlocking investment in Africa. We already have some regional monetary zones in Africa, such as the West African countries with the BCAO or the central countries of Africa. The real issue is the source of financing, which is usually in dollars or in euros. And I'm also talking about like financing that can make projects bankable with longer maturity and patient capital, as we mentioned. So these currencies, they will need to be reimbursed either in dollars or in euros, and that's, I would say, a challenge. One area that we are currently assessing to unlock more investments using local currency is going out to the local markets in Africa, and to do so we need to build trust in the African markets in terms of the infrastructure project that we are developing, so that, for example, we can issue bonds in francs CFA to fund infrastructure projects. But now again, there is some education to be done to the market, because there is a development risk, there is also a construction risk that we need to be taken for this project to happen. And it's not easy to build this trust. It requires time, but this is really an area where using local currency can unlock more investment in Africa.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I like what very much Reda mentioned. I think there is something I would like to share with all colleagues. By the way, the most and strongest power network integrated one in the globe is not Europe. It's actually the Middle East, between the original GCC countries. GCC 6 Gulf countries is really having the more robust, advanced power integrated system. And the 6 GCC countries, everyone has its own currency within its zone. And it's not actually Europe. And they are very advanced. They are moving with AI and everything. It's only about one issue, because they have what we call a GCC, the Gulf Country Council, that basically having one common economic prosperity goal for this one. And that's exactly a lot of measures. I don't know if my colleagues in the panel will agree with me. It's not only about economic unified or shared goals. It's about several things: political commitment among leaders, geopolitical context within the same governments, economic situation, how can to trade everything. It's a set of several things. That's why I refer to Bretton Woods, that basically Bretton Woods, when it happened after World War II, would basically put the context that the whole world have to come with Marshall Project to support basically the countries have not won the World War II, and then this Marshall Project moved into World Bank. That's the origin of World Bank. IBRD started like this. And now they moved to IDA and MIGA and IFC, but that's the start. So when there is basically the global leadership in terms of geopolitical context, they unified about one goal, they move it further. And that's exactly, I think, what is needed for this one. I stop here. Thank you. Maybe Jisung want to add something.
I just wanted to address two questions very briefly. The first one about direct investment versus capacity building. So I just want to say, in MIGA is actually part of the World Bank group, and hence, we're actually working very closely with our sister institutions, World Bank and IFC, in the sense that, World Bank is working a lot on the capacity building of the energy utilities in these FCS countries. Often these weak SOEs are, one of the key issues, and, they are not technically or financially really, capable, and hence, capacity building, as well as, just making the tariff more, sustainable. That's what our World Bank World Bank is doing. And then, in addition to that, when the SOE becomes more financially sustainable, then IFC and the MIGA work together to provide the direct financing to the SOE. So I just wanted to mention that. And then very quickly on carbon credit, MIGA can also support, as I mentioned, the carbon credit, so that we're basically making sure the government delivers, what they say they will, how they will support the carbon credit.
Thank you, Jisung. I see Marta, my colleague, is going to get me the hit on my back saying, 1 minute, Ahmed. So please, if you have anything to add, let me know. Colleagues in the panel would like to add anything? Okay. By that, I would like to thank you all for the very good panel discussion. I myself, I enjoyed it very much. Please share with me a very special clap, thanking to all panelists here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for the wonderful discussion. In closing, just last few announcements. I'll be very quick because I'm standing between you and lunch. This is the end of our sessions in the green track, but you are all invited to the closing session after lunch to be held in the Kameha Universal. And there are QR codes that you'll find in the dome for a survey. So that survey is for the entire Innovation Week. Please make sure you fill in the survey. And in closing, I'd like to appreciate your support and participation under this green track. Thank you very much for interactive discussions. I am from Eswatini, so I'd like to share a proverb from Eswatini that says, a twig is shaped while it is still green. So the discussion in this green track reminded us of how we can still innovate now and collaborate. Thank you.